Let's talk about Tibetan Dream Yoga, one of the fundamental practices of Tibetan Buddhism, or at least one of its schools, and some of the main practices. This is really for advanced lucid dreamers, I would suggest. So, I would highly recommend my series on dreams. If you want to get the most out of this, I would suggest you start at least inducing lucidity on a regular basis before you get into these techniques. In my series on dreams, we talk about the meaning of dreams, dream interpretation, lucid dreaming, and more, and it's really the foundation for this video here. I also want to say you don't need to identify as a Buddhist, Tibetan, or otherwise to make the most of these techniques. These are powerful techniques, and you'll find them in secular approaches to dreaming as well. But I just love the connection between dreaming and psychology and spirituality that Tibetan Dream Yoga brings. This is Deep Psychology. I'm Ross. We blend spirituality, psychology, and self help to shine a light on your inner workings. Listen if you want to get real, powerful insights and avoid all the fluffy nonsense that abounds in self help circles. You'll know more about how your psychology works than 99% of people on the planet. Find me on all the major podcasting platforms or head to deep-psychology.com, visited by thousands every month, for tons of free resources. And I'm now on Patreon. I'd really appreciate you supporting the show, and in return you can access exclusive perks. Alright, time for the show. Alright, so I've called this advanced lucid dreaming because basically if you master the techniques of Tibetan Dream Yoga, you're going to be a very confident lucid dreamer, capable of doing basically whatever you want in your dreams. And by then you're going to have a high level of stability and a high level of control over your dreams. Now, I must say in Tibetan Dream Yoga, the goal isn't per se to become a great lucid dreamer, at least not in its original context in Tibetan Buddhism, but I think it's a great way to link our series on dreaming to spirituality because we've done a lot from a psychological point of view. But at the end of the day, I also talk about meditation and spirituality, and I'm a meditation teacher. So I'm very interested in the crossover there because it's actually not that common that you'll find dreams taken very seriously by the spiritual traditions. We're going to talk about that. I'll also say that I've not mastered all of these techniques. So uh, if I continue my journey, I'm sure I will. But I just wanted to share this. I've been doing some research and I think it's really interesting. And I find that over time, I'm naturally moving up the stages anyway. So I'm still on my journey too. I feel indebted to a particular article that I found on this subject, actually 30,000 words long, talking about dreams, Tibetan Buddhism, and integral theory. If you're interested, I'll link to that in the description. That is the source of most of this information. All right, let's talk a bit more about the purpose of Tibetan Dream Yoga from a classical point of view. Why is it part of Tibetan Buddhism? Well, we have to think about the purpose of Tibetan Buddhism itself. It's also called Vajrayana, I should say, Tibetan Buddhism. The goal is to awaken out of the dream of waking life and to end suffering. We must remember this as we're talking about Tibetan Dream Yoga because essentially it, it has a big influence on how you approach it. It's actually Tibetan Dream Yoga is one of the 6 main yogas or main practices of one of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism. So it's very interesting that they incorporate this. It's the goals are quite different from the ones that I've been promoting so far in this series and the ones that I've tended to pursue through dreams alone. My goals are very psychological because I think dreams unlock your psychology in a way that is difficult to get in waking life. But the Tibetan Buddhist goal is really enlightenment. It's not necessarily psychological understanding of yourself. So let's just bear that in mind. I'd also think it's important to mention that Buddhism is basically a kind of dream yoga, whether you're waking or sleeping or whatever you're doing, because one of the fundamental tenets of Buddhism is that the whole of existence is kind of a dream. including our subjective identity and our subjective sense of suffering. It's a dream in that it's impermanent and always changing, and it has a certain irreality to it. So that helps us understand what the role of Tibetan Dream Yoga is. It's to try and help us see that all of life is really a kind of dream, and this helps us awaken from the dream of life. So, from this point of view, Tibetan Dream Yoga isn't an end in itself, which is kind of how I've been presenting it so far. It's really to awaken consciousness in your dreams such that you'll bring that awakened consciousness into your life and realize what I've just been saying about the dreamy nature of life, or the fact that life is like a dream. Tibetan Buddhism is quite unique because other schools of Buddhism, like Zen, tend to view everything that isn't the Buddha nature, that isn't emptiness, as being illusory. So dreams are the same because dreams are basically made of form. It's not the six senses as in our waking senses, but we're seeing, we're hearing, we're feeling stuff. A lot of other Buddhist schools will treat this as a delusion, which I think is a great teaching, but also feel like, well, perhaps we could mm, use dreams as a way to see that illusion rather than just dreaming but not really doing anything with it. And this is why Tibetan Dream Yoga really appeals to me. As I've mentioned, dreams are your creation. And to the extent that you're not aware of this is the extent to which you're lost in ignorance and self delusion. It's kind of like being an actor in a film and forgetting that you're the actor, not the character that you are playing. This is what's happening in dreams all the time. And it creates a lot of problems for us. And it's I don't know if it's a metaphor. It mirrors what we're doing in everyday life because basically we're identified with our character, with our personality, and we forget our deeper nature, which is actually emptiness or the Buddha nature. And in this way, there's a clear mirror between dreams and waking life. We're unconscious in dreams because we forget that we're dreaming. We forget that we are we are everything. We are the creator of the dream, not the dream itself, not the character in the dream. We are the entire dream. And in the same way, we are not the character we are playing in everyday life. And I mean that quite literally. We are not this identity. We are not this personality or this body or this mind. We are something much deeper than that. And so there's a clear correspondence there between dreams and waking life. And in the same way, in dreams, when you wake up, when you realize that you are dreaming, in lucid dreaming, you realize you're dreaming, you're not just dreaming unconsciously. You wake up from the creative loop. The creative loop, I suppose you could think of it as the wheel of Dharma. Um, it's our endless cycle of proliferation in the dream because in the dream world, your thoughts basically become reality quite instantaneously. And so everything that's happening around you is your own creation. When you forget about that creation, when you're doing it unconsciously, you're just lost in the everything that's going on around you, forgetting that you are creating it in the dream. Now, I'm not saying that in waking life we're literally imagining things into reality. That's not what I'm saying. But the principle is the same. The wheel of Dharma in everyday life is the same. The creative loop in everyday life is the same. By running all our old patterns like physical, mental, psychological, emotional, and so on, we're basically creating endlessly in our everyday life. We're creating our life moment by moment. And we are bought into the identity with our personality. And so when you wake up in the dream world and you realize that you're lucid dreaming and that you're creating everything, there's a bigger metaphor there for your everyday life. Not that you're literally like creating other people as you are in dreams, but you are perpetuating your own suffering and your own delusion, essentially. And this is one of the main teachings of Buddhism. Now, the end goal in Tibetan Dream Yoga is to basically dissolve the dream state. So once we've gone through, there's basically a lot of exercises related to lucid dreaming. And then eventually we want to dissolve the dream world. We want to dissolve, you know, the place we're in, the people around us, the things that are happening in the dream. We want to dissolve that, and we want to realize that we are the dreamer, we are the dreaming consciousness, we are this awake consciousness in the dream. And that is, it's analogous in a way to what who we really are in daily life. We're not the senses, we're not the body, we're not the mind, we're not anything that happens to us. We are actually the pure witnessing conscious empty awareness behind all of that. And basically, the idea is that if we can make our dreams an object, if we can dissolve our dreams and realize that we are creating them all, we can do the same in everyday life, and we can up our levels of awareness in everyday life too. And in this way, it contributes to basically the classical path of enlightenment, which is freedom from the delusion of life, from the delusion of suffering, that comes from identifying with the mind, the body, and the senses. So, keeping that all in mind, how do we actually do Tibetan Dream Yoga? And there's three different categories of practice here. There are dream practices, waking practices, and practices that bridge the gap to do in the morning when you wake up. So, let's go to waking practices. Now, I won't go into the Tibetan version of this. It's actually discussed in the article that I've left in the description. But there's basically a lot of crossover here between the exercises that I give in How to Lucid Dream, the video that I'd made called How to Lucid Dream earlier in the series, and the type of exercises that they do in Tibetan Dream Yoga in everyday life. And basically, the overarching goal is to see all your experiences as dreamlike. Everything that you're doing in your life, to see it as dreamlike. And actually, I think meditation and other contemplative practices help this and inform this. And I find that there's a lot of crossover between waking life meditation and waking life dream yoga. So, in waking life, you can work on the practices I give and how to lucid dream. You can check out the article that I link to for a more detailed and more authentic description of them in from the Tibetan Buddhist point of view. Or I think if you're practicing meditation or some serious kind of contemplative practice, you're already doing quite well. Now, as for the dream practices themselves, this is literally for when you are dreaming in dreams. So there's 6 stages to this. The first one is to become lucid and to realize that what you thought was real, the dream that was so captivating and so convincing and that triggered you emotionally so much, that your dreams are not actually real. And obviously, you know this. I know that when you wake up in the morning, you know that your dreams aren't equivalent to waking life. But can you see that as you're dreaming? Can you actually be awake in your dream and say, I'm dreaming. This is not real. This is a dream. That is lucid dreaming. So if you're not sure about that, you can check out the other videos in this series. That's the first stage. The second stage is to gain a measure of control over the dream and to lose fear of it. Um, Basically, what this means is that when you realize that you're lucid dreaming, the dream loses it's not so convincing anymore because you truly realize it is just a dream in the moment, and then you're able to control certain things about it. Now, actually, the 6 stages here are actually all about control and manipulating dream, but in this particular stage, they cite flying and visiting different places. So it's really about moving the body to different places in a conscious way, whether that's flying or walking or running. The idea is that you're lucid and that you're doing this at the same time. The third one is to contemplate the dream as impermanent and illusory, just as you would in the waking world with like regular Buddhist practice. So here, the idea is to perhaps look around you, to feel your body, to look at other people, to look at the place you're in as you're lucid dreaming, and just sort of try and contact the illusoriness of it. I mean, I've actually found this a lot easier to do than it is to do with waking life, because dreams have a different kind of feel to them. They feel a bit illusory by nature. They feel a bit sort of, hmm, I don't know, sort of with a lighter touch, not so convincing to the senses. So that's the next one, is to look around you, feel your senses, and to try and see sort of the illusory nature of them. The fourth one, we're halfway there now. The fourth one is to change objects in the dream. So you perhaps change a person from being big to small. You see a mountain and you shrink it, or you take an ant and you size it up. Just changing the size of different objects, or even merging objects together, is another one. And basically, the idea here is just to gain a more measure of control over the dream, to be able to not just transport yourself and move around, but to actually change what is there. And this gives you more control. The fifth stage is to alter the shape of the body and to make it disappear. Now, although you might realize that when you're lucid dreaming that you are not the dream and that you are creating the dream with your own mind, it's different to realizing that that you are not the dream body. And when you change the shape of your body in some way, or you make it disappear, you really realize that you are not the dream body. And it gets you asking, who am I then if I'm not this dream body? Because this is, even though you're becoming lucid in a sense is stripping away an identity. But doing this with the dream body is just the next step up from that. The sixth step in traditional Tibetan Dream Yoga practice is Tibetan Deity Yoga. Now, if you're interested in that, I would check out the article that I linked to. If you're not sure what this is, you can replace this with an attempt to just contact pure consciousness beyond the body, beyond your senses in the dream, beyond everything that's happening, the pure conscious awareness that is there. If you're not the dream body or the dream world, who are you? And that's what you want to try and contact. It really helps if you've done meditation or some kind of contemplative practice if you're going to do this, because it's basically the same thing except you're doing it in the dream world. So you're kind of practicing meditation in the dream world. The good thing is you don't have to be a Buddhist to do all of this stuff. You know, once you've learned how to lucid dream, you can work on these stages and you'll be doing Tibetan Dream Yoga. Whether you want to buy into like the Buddhist background or not, um, it doesn't really matter. You'll be doing the same thing, and it gives you a guide for lucid dreaming and a way to take it to a more advanced level and to make it a kind of spiritual practice. It's interesting because I cited the book A Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming, great book if you want to really go deep into lucid dreaming. And they actually give a few different stages of dreaming in the book. Now, I'm not going to go into those, but basically, what the authors say is that after gaining lucidity and after spending enough time creating and altering and exploring the dream world, we're finally able to rest in pure consciousness while in the dream state. I was actually quite taken aback by this because the book doesn't come across like that. It doesn't come across like it would teach you things like that, but it shows you that there's correlation here, because this it's quite a modern book. Tibetan Dream Yoga, on the other hand, is probably hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. So there is a clear path here, and Tibetan Dream Yoga is just another way into that. All right, so that's the sleeping practices. Finally, the morning wake up practice. Quite simple, and it's really a way to transition from the dream world into the waking world in a smooth way, and trying to take the lessons from the dream world into the waking world. So, what you do is when you wake up, you take a deep breath, you exhale deeply, then you sit up in bed, you look forward at eye level, and you do 3 heavy in and out breaths. Then you stand up and you reach your fingertips upwards towards the ceiling, and you exhale deeply. And now at this point, what you do is you reflect on the transition between waking and dreams. and realizing that the waking life is a dream in its own way. Yes, it's maybe more reliable than the dream world in the sense that it's more repetitive, but you still have this body, you still have this consciousness. And it's in that sense, it's kind of the same as a dream world. And the idea is that you want to contact this perhaps for a few minutes before you start going about your day, but also to bring it into your day. And actually, I think this really correlates nicely with the techniques I've been giving you on how to induce lucidity in the first place, because we're trying to question the reality of our life. And yes, we can conclude, yes, right now we're waking, right now we're dreaming, but that questioning process, I found it actually helps you tap into the fact that waking life and dream life isn't as different as you might think it is. So, those are the practices for waking, sleeping, and the transition between the two. That's my episode on Tibetan Dream Yoga. If you want to get into advanced lucid dreaming, this is what you want. So, go away and experiment with those. And if you dig what I do, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Do support me on Patreon, that would be an enormous help. Thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.